My fiancée slept with her boss while I worked 80-hour weeks to fund our wedding, so I canceled everything and disappeared without a trace. I'm a 30-year-old guy, and for 3 years, I worked 80-hour weeks so my fiancée could have the wedding of her dreams. Most mornings started before dawn, coffee gone cold by 6 a.m., steel dust on my hands before 7. My job wasn't glamorous. It was the kind that left you with sore wrists, aching shoulders, and a paycheck that always felt a little too small for the hours you gave. But every overtime shift, every skipped lunch, every missed weekend, it all felt worth it, because every dollar I saved was one step closer to our future. Rachel was the reason I kept going. She was ambitious, the kind of woman who could light up a room and convince anyone she was meant for more. When we talked about our wedding, her eyes would sparkle with that same conviction. "We deserve something beautiful," she'd say, leaning on my shoulder as I rubbed the tension out of my neck. "Something people will remember." I'd smile, exhausted but proud. I wanted to give her that, a moment she could be proud of, something to prove all our hard work meant something. But there was a quiet part of me that noticed things changing. Her tastes started shifting. Designer shoes instead of her old sneakers, wine nights instead of movie nights, social events that I wasn't invited to because I needed the rest. I told myself it was fine, that she was just adapting to her new marketing job. She worked with successful people. Of course, she wanted to fit in. Still, some nights, as I came home to an empty apartment and the smell of her perfume fading from the hallway, I caught myself wondering, when did our future start to sound more like hers than ours? And that question never left my mind. I woke up most mornings to the sound of my alarm slicing through the quiet, the apartment still dark, except for the faint glow of streetlights outside the window. My body ached from the night before, muscles tight from hauling boxes and climbing ladders, but I pushed through anyway. I didn't complain. This was the price I paid for what I thought was love. Rachel's smile, her laughter, the way she'd rest her head against my chest while talking about our wedding kept me going. "One more month, and we'll finally have the venue locked down," she'd say, sipping her latte as if she hadn't noticed my tired eyes. Lately, though, things had started feeling different. She came home later and later, her phone always buzzing, a sly grin tugging at her lips whenever she typed back someone. "Long day at work," she'd say, but there was something in her tone I couldn't place. My gut tightened like a vice, but I shoved it down. She's ambitious. She's building her career. That's all right. At work, I tried to distract myself, counting hours like they were victories. The factory's metallic clangs and the smell of oil were familiar, almost comforting, because at least they were predictable. But even here, my thoughts kept drifting to Rachel, where she was, who she was with, if she was thinking of me at all. It wasn't jealousy. I told myself it was concern. She's under pressure. She's stressed. "I just need to trust her," I murmured to the empty break room, staring at the peeling paint on the wall. One Thursday evening, I came home early, carrying a bag of takeout to surprise her. The apartment was quiet. Too quiet. The smell of fresh coffee lingered, but Rachel wasn't there. On the kitchen counter, I noticed a business card I hadn't seen before, her name handwritten over a man's, someone I didn't recognize. My stomach sank, a cold knot forming in my chest. I told myself it was nothing, maybe just a new client. But the seed of doubt had been planted, and I couldn't shake it. Something was shifting, and I had no idea just how far it would go. Things started unraveling slowly, like a thread pulled from a sweater I didn't even realize was worn thin. Rachel came home later each night, sometimes smelling faintly of perfume I didn't recognize. Her hair perfectly styled even after a supposedly long day at the office. "I had to stay late for a presentation," she said one night, sliding past me without a glance. Her voice was calm, almost casual, but my chest tightened anyway. I wanted to ask questions, to pry for the truth, but I swallowed the words. I told myself I was overreacting. She's just focused on work, right? Friends began to notice the changes too. At a dinner with Mark and a few coworkers, he leaned across the table and said, "Man, she's spending a lot of time away these days. You sure she's really into the wedding planning?" I laughed it off, joking that she's ambitious. You know how it is. But their looks lingered in my mind long after the conversation ended. And for the first time, I started questioning whether I was blind to something obvious at home. The small things added up. Her phone constantly buzzed on silent mode, and she would quickly hide it under her pillow when I walked into the room. She started avoiding long conversations, steering topics away from our plans or even from how my day went. I could feel a distance growing, a wall I couldn't climb. One Friday evening, I decided to surprise her at the office, wanting to bring lunch and see her smile in person. The elevator ride up was silent, my heart thumping in a mixture of anticipation and unease. When I arrived, she wasn't at her desk. The office smelled like coffee and stale carpet, the hum of fluorescent lights above making everything feel unreal. I asked a coworker where she was, and they glanced at me oddly, whispering something I couldn't quite catch. I rounded the corner, and my stomach dropped. Through the glass wall of a meeting room, I saw Rachel laughing, leaning close to her boss, Ethan. Their heads were inches apart, and they were joking in a way that made my chest tighten so hard I could barely breathe. I froze, unsure if what I was seeing was real or if I wanted it to be. I walked away quietly, pretending I had business elsewhere, but inside, a storm was brewing. Something was off. Terribly off, and deep down, I feared I already knew the truth. I couldn't stop thinking about that moment for days. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Rachel and Ethan in that meeting room, laughing together like I wasn't even there. I tried to tell myself it was nothing, just a friendly joke between coworkers, but my gut refused to listen. There was a weight pressing on my chest, a gnawing feeling that I couldn't shake, no matter how hard I tried. When I confronted her later that evening, she was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, hair falling perfectly over one shoulder. "Hey, I brought lunch," I said, trying to keep my voice casual. She looked up, a small smile playing on her lips. "Thanks, babe. I got something earlier, but that's sweet of you." I forced a smile, but inside, the tension was unbearable. I finally blurted it out, my voice trembling. "Who's Ethan? Why were you so close to him the other day?" Her eyes widened for just a second, just long enough for me to catch it. Then she laughed softly. "What are you talking about? He's my boss. We were joking around, You're overthinking things." I wanted to believe her. I really did. But that little hesitation, the way her fingers lingered on her phone, the way she avoided my gaze, it all screamed louder than her words. I spent the next few days watching her more closely, noticing how she would step into offices when she didn't need to, smile at messages I wasn't privy to, leave the house with hurried excuses. Each small lie added another brick to the wall between us. One night, lying awake, I texted my friend Mark. "Something's wrong. I saw them, and I can't shake it." He didn't answer right away, and when he finally did, it was just a simple, "Trust your gut, man. Don't ignore it." I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the ceiling fan, spinning lazily, my hands clenched into fists. A part of me wanted to confront her again, to demand the truth, but another part feared what I might find. The thought of being blindsided, of losing everything I'd worked so hard for, made my stomach churn. And yet, despite every warning, I couldn't stop myself from planning the moment I'd finally catch her. I just didn't know how close I was to discovering a truth that would change everything. The tension in the apartment had become unbearable. Every text notification made my heart leap, and every ding of her phone sent a spike of anxiety straight through me. I kept catching her in little lies work trips she had to attend that didn't appear on any company calendar. Late nights at the office that ended suspiciously early. I told myself I was imagining it, that I was being paranoid, but the pit in my stomach refused to lie. One evening, I came home early from a double shift, hoping to surprise her with dinner. The hallway smelled faintly of her perfume, and I thought I could hear faint laughter through the slightly ajar office door. My chest tightened as I approached, each step heavier than the last. I paused outside the door, listening, and there it was. Rachel laughing in that way that used to make me melt, but now felt like a knife twisting inside me. She sounded close to someone else, someone I didn't want her to be close to. I pushed the door open slowly. The room was empty, except for the faint glow of a laptop screen and a hotel receipt lying on the desk. My fingers shook as I picked it up. The date this Friday, the names hers and another man's. My stomach sank, nausea curling around my throat. I could barely breathe, my world narrowing to that single piece of paper. I didn't confront her immediately. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the receipt, replaying every laugh, every late night, every small work excuse in my mind. It all made sense now, a brutal pattern I had refused to see. I could feel the walls closing in, the weight of betrayal pressing on me like a storm. When she finally walked in, humming softly, I looked at her with a hollow expression. "Hey, dinner's ready," she said brightly, completely unaware. I wanted to scream, to demand answers, to rip the truth out of her mouth. But instead, I whispered, voice barely audible, "I know about Friday." Her smile faltered for just a second, eyes flickering with something I couldn't name. And in that pause, I realized everything was about to change. Whatever came next, there was no going back. I didn't wait for her explanation. I couldn't. The words stuck in my throat, replaced by a cold, numbing disbelief. My hands were shaking, heart hammering so loudly I could hear it over the soft hum of the apartment. Rachel froze, mid-step, eyes wide, lips slightly parted like she had finally realized the truth had caught up to her. For a moment, the room felt unreal-like I was watching a scene from someone else's life. She tried to speak, her voice faltering. It's not what you think," she stammered, taking a tentative step closer. I shook my head, the disbelief giving way to something sharper: anger, betrayal, and heartbreak all tangled together. "Then explain this," I said, holding up the hotel receipt. Her eyes darted to it and back to me, and I saw a flicker of panic. "I didn't mean for it to happen," she whispered. I could barely process the words. I wanted to scream, to shake her until she admitted the truth, but instead, I felt a strange calm wash over me. The years of sacrifice, the late nights, the skipped meals, it all hit me at once. I realized I had been funding someone else's betrayal. My entire world, every dream I had built with her, was crumbling in front of me. Then there was Himathan, her boss. He called my phone later that night, arrogantly claiming, "Rachel deserves someone more successful, someone she can lean on." I didn't respond. I couldn't. I just sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the ceiling. The apartment around me suddenly feeling like a cage I had been trapped in without realizing it. I knew I had a choice: confront, fight, beg, or walk away. And for the first time, I felt a clarity I hadn't had in months. I didn't need to yell. I didn't need to fight. I didn't need to watch her try to explain herself. I could leave, so I did. I walked out without a word, leaving the apartment, the life we had planned, and everything I had sacrificed behind. And as I stepped into the cold night air, I felt something I hadn't in years: freedom. But even as the city lights blurred around me, a single thought gnawed at the edge of my mind. Where would I go, and could I ever trust anyone again? The apartment felt empty the moment I closed the door behind me, and the silence was deafening. I didn't bother looking back. I didn't want to see her expression, didn't want to give her the satisfaction of knowing she had hurt me. I wandered the streets for hours, the chill of the night pressing into my bones, every breath sharp and stinging. The city smelled of rain and asphalt, and the distant hum of traffic was the only thing grounding me in reality. I realized just how hollow everything felt. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every dollar I had poured into a dream that wasn't mine to begin with. I ended up at a 24-hour diner, the smell of frying bacon and coffee somehow comforting in its normalcy. I slid into a booth in the corner, ordered a black coffee, and stared out the window at the world, moving on without me. The neon sign flickered above, reflecting on the wet pavement, and I thought about all the moments I had missed while working, while trying to fund her life of luxury. Each memory felt like a dagger, twisting slowly. Messages started coming in, Rachel calling, texting, her tone panicked, desperate. "Please, let's talk." One read. Another, "I made a mistake. I love you. I can fix this." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Every fiber of me wanted to confront her, scream, demand answers, but another part of me knew that doing so would only chain me to the pain I was trying to escape. I thought about our wedding plans, the vendors, the deposits, the invitations, all of it now meaningless. I called the few vendors I had contacts for and canceled everything quietly, feeling a strange sense of liberation with each call. I was erasing a life we had built together, but I felt like I was reclaiming myself piece by piece, that as I sat in the diner, the hum of conversation around me, I felt a strange calm settling in. I wasn't happy, far from it, but, for the first time in months, I felt the faintest spark of control. I had walked away from betrayal, and though the road ahead was uncertain, one thing was clear: I wouldn't let anyone hurt me like that again. And yet, deep down, I couldn't stop thinking about one thing. How far would she go to find me? And would I even care if she did? I knew I needed to disappear completely, before Rachel or anyone else could drag me back into that life of lies. The next morning, I went through our apartment one last time, taking only the essentials clothes, my laptop, a few keepsakes that had nothing to do with her. Everything else stayed behind. The furniture, the wedding invitations, the memories carefully boxed up and left for her to face alone. The air smelled faintly of her perfume, clinging stubbornly to the curtains, and I had to force myself not to gag. I didn't even leave a note, not one apologizing, not one explaining. She didn't deserve the satisfaction. I moved quietly, like a shadow slipping out of someone else's life. The cab ride to the train station felt surreal, the city blurring past in streaks of gray and gold. I didn't look back, and I didn't call anyone to say where I was going. I wanted to vanish without a trace, to leave the betrayal behind and start fresh somewhere no one knew my name. Each mile of the train felt like peeling away layers of the past, shedding the weight of heartbreak and sacrifice. I arrived in a city I barely knew, rented a small studio apartment, and locked the door behind me. The silence was different. Here clean, untainted, almost healing. I wandered the streets aimlessly, letting the sounds, the smells, the rhythm of this new place wash over me. Coffee shops, crowded sidewalks, the distant sirens, all of it grounded me in a reality that was mine alone. For the first time in years, I didn't have to check my phone constantly. No messages from Rachel demanding explanations. No reminders of how hard I had worked for someone who would betray me. I cooked my own meals, walked to work without looking at the clock, and let the nights pass without anxiety gnawing at my chest. And yet, even in this newfound freedom, there was a strange emptiness. A hollow space where my trust and innocence used to live. I knew I had escaped, but the question lingered, biting quietly at the edges of my mind. Could I ever allow someone back in? Could I ever risk it again? Months passed, and life in the new city began to feel normal. Not happy, not perfect, but stable in a way I hadn't experienced in years. I went to work, came home to my tiny apartment, and slowly started rebuilding myself. The sting of betrayal was still there, lingering like a bruise that refused to fade. But the raw, burning pain had dulled into something I could manage. I even started laughing again quietly at first, at little things, the way I used to before Rachel. But I couldn't ignore the echoes of my past. One evening while grabbing groceries, I overheard someone mention her name, and my stomach sank instantly. "Rachel!" a voice called out behind me. I turned to see one of our mutual friends, her eyes wide with awkward panic. She's losing it," they whispered. "She keeps calling your old apartment, showing up at places. Ethan's gone now. She's spiraling." A part of me felt vindicated, a small, dark satisfaction at seeing her unravel. But another part of me felt an odd hollowness. Seeing her suffer didn't erase the betrayal, didn't undo the sleepless nights or the heartbreak. I thought back to every text I ignored, every call I didn't answer. I had given her the ultimate punishment. Silence. At night, I still woke up occasionally, heart pounding, haunted by memories of her laugh, the way she used to lean into me, pretending love was all we had. But the city around me was indifferent, and I began to understand that life moves on, with or without closure. I kept myself busy gym work. Late night walks, but the thought lingered. If she tried to find me, would I care? Could I even face her after everything? And then one evening, as I walked past a coffee shop, the bell above the door chimed, and I felt it a faint, almost imperceptible jolt. Someone had just entered, and in that single, ordinary sound, the past threatened to collide with the life I had built. Weeks passed, and I tried to settle into a rhythm, convincing myself that the past was behind me. I focused on work, slowly climbing the ladder at my new job, spending evenings journaling and picking up hobbies I had abandoned long ago. There was a quiet satisfaction in small victories, making my own decisions without consulting anyone, sleeping through the night without anxiety, even enjoying meals I cooked for myself without someone else's opinions. It was healing, subtle but undeniable. Therapy helped more than I expected. I unraveled years of self-blame, learned to recognize manipulation, and finally admitted to myself that none of it was my fault. I began to set boundaries, refusing to answer calls from anyone who might pull me back into that storm. I was learning to value myself, to trust my instincts again, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt in control. The apartment I rented felt more like home each day. I could leave the windows open at night, let the city sounds drift in, and not feel the weight of betrayal pressing down. I started walking through neighborhoods I hadn't explored, visiting coffee shops, chatting with strangers, letting the world slowly remind me that life could be beautiful again, even without her. And yet every so often, I'd catch a reflection of myself in a window or a passing mirror and see a shadow of who I used to be. Exhausted, heartbroken, blindsided. Those flashes reminded me that healing wasn't linear, but I was slowly reclaiming what I had lost. Then one evening, I found myself at a small park, watching children play, couples laugh, and people live their lives without knowing the drama I'd escaped. A strange sense of peace settled over me. And I realized something important. I hadn't just walked away from Rachel, I had walked toward myself. I had survived, and for the first time in years, I felt the faintest spark of hope that I could be happy again. But even in this newfound freedom, a question lingered at the edge of my mind. What if the past wasn't done with me yet? It had been over a year since I disappeared, and I thought I had finally closed the chapter on Rachel. Life had settled into a quiet routine work, walks, evenings spent cooking for myself, nights filled with silence rather than heartbreak. I'd rebuilt a version of myself I thought I had lost forever, stronger, calmer, and guarded. Trust was still fragile, but I was learning to let it grow slowly, cautiously, like a delicate plant. Then, one crisp autumn afternoon, I walked into a small coffee shop near my apartment. The smell of roasted beans and cinnamon hit me, grounding me in the present. I was ordering a latte when I felt a presence behind me that made the air shift. I turned, and my stomach dropped. Rachel. She was standing there, looking older, more haggard, but unmistakably her. She froze when she saw me, eyes widening in shock, panic, and something I couldn't immediately name. "I didn't expect to see you here," she stammered, voice trembling. My first instinct was to step back, to shield myself from the tidal wave of memories she could unleash. But a small, icy part of me wanted to hear it. All the apologies, the excuses, the desperate attempts to justify her betrayal. I messed up. "I made the biggest mistake of my life," she said finally, her eyes glistening. "Please, can we talk?" For a moment, the old ache flared, the same ache that had haunted me for months when I first caught her with Ethan. But as I looked at her, really looked at her, I realized I felt nothing like I used to. That person who had loved blindly, who had sacrificed everything, who had been blindsided and crushed, she no longer existed in me. I took a slow breath, feeling the weight of all the sleepless nights, the endless hours, the betrayal that had once seemed insurmountable. "And then," I said softly, "there's nothing left to say." I turned and walked away, the crisp air filling my lungs. For the first time, the past didn't reach out for me, and I knew I had finally, truly reclaimed my life. But as her voice called after me, fading into the background, I couldn't help but think, would she ever understand the strength it took to simply walk away? Sitting in my new apartment that evening, I finally allowed myself to breathe. The city outside hummed with life car horns, laughter, footsteps echoing down the sidewalks, and for the first time in years, it felt like it belonged to me. I reflected on everything: the sleepless nights, the endless hours at work, the small victories, the heartbreak, and the ultimate betrayal. Each memory was a scar, but it was mine, and I had survived it. I realized that all those 80-hour weeks, all the sacrifices, weren't wasted. They had built more than a wedding fund. They had built resilience. I had learned who I was without her, who I could be without someone else dictating my worth or my happiness. I had found clarity in silence, empowerment in walking away, and strength in reclaiming my life from someone who never truly deserved it. The apartment smelled faintly of fresh coffee and the faint hint of the candles I had lit earlier, their flame flickering gently in the quiet. I poured myself a cup and sat by the window, watching the lights shimmer off the wet streets. I could feel the tension of the past year slowly dissolving, leaving only a calm awareness of my own boundaries and my own value. I thought about the chance encounters, the lessons learned, the moments of pain that had shaped me. I had been blindsided, humiliated, and heartbroken, but I had emerged stronger, wiser, and unchained. I had finally discovered that real love and respect start with oneself. I whispered to the empty room, a quiet affirmation to the life I had rebuilt. I didn't vanish. Out of spite, I disappeared to find myself again. And in that moment, I knew it was true. The betrayal no longer defined me. The heartbreak had not broken me. I had chosen freedom over devastation, and in doing so, I had claimed the life that was always meant to be mine. As the night deepened, I felt a rare, unshakable peace. The past was behind me, and the future unwritten, uncertain but mind-stretched ahead. I finally understood that walking away was not the end of my story, but the beginning of everything I had been fighting to protect: myself.